The sky above Rabaul burns orange at dusk, January 1943. A formation of twin-engine bombers cuts through the tropical haze, their silhouettes unmistakable against the volcanic ridges of New Britain. Mitsubishi G4M. Betty bombers, sleek, elegant, deadly. Their engines drone in perfect synchronization, a mechanical hymn to imperial ambition. Below, American pilots at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal listen to the radar chatter, their fingers tightening around joystick grips. They've seen the Betty before. They know what's coming. But what they don't know yet is that this aircraft, Japan's pride of naval aviation, carries a secret so absurd it will rewrite the rules of air combat in the Pacific. Lieutenant Commander James Flatley sits in the intelligence tent, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the evening breeze. He's not a pilot today, he's a detective. Scattered across the wooden table before him are fragments of wreckage hauled from the jungle floor, twisted aluminum, scorched wiring, a section of fuselage peppered with .50 caliber holes. The pieces came from a Betty shot down 3 days earlier by a Wildcat patrol. Standard procedure: recover, analyze, exploit. Flatley lights a cigarette and leans closer. The metal is thin, alarmingly thin. He runs his thumb along the edge of a fuel tank fragment. No sealant, no rubberized lining, no armor plating. He frowns. Every bomber he's ever studied, German, British, American, protects its fuel systems like a beating heart. It's Aviation 101. You don't send men into combat in a flying gasoline can, unless you do. Outside, the humid night presses in. Jungle insects scream their nightly chorus. Somewhere in the distance, a generator coughs to life, illuminating the airstrip in harsh white light. Flatley exhales smoke and stares at the wreckage. He thinks back to the combat reports flooding his desk over the past 6 months. Pilots describing the same phenomenon again and again. Betty bombers erupting into fireballs at the first burst of gunfire. Not damaged, not crippled, obliterated. Jesus Christ, he mutters. The Betty's official designation is the Mitsubishi G4M, but American crews have another name for it now, the Flying Lighter. One spark, one tracer round, and the entire aircraft becomes an inferno. Flatley has read dozens of after-action reports. Wildcats and P-38s shredding Bettys in seconds. Pilots returning to base, shaken not by the difficulty of the kill, but by its horrifying ease. He picks up another fragment, a fuel line connector. It's beautifully machined, precision cut, a testament to Japanese engineering. But it's exposed, completely unprotected. He sets it down and reaches for a file folder marked Enemy Aircraft Analysis, Confidential. Inside are photographs taken by reconnaissance planes, Bettys parked on airstrips in Rabaul, their long, graceful wings stretching nearly 20 meters. They look fast, they look dangerous, and they are when they reach their target. But getting there and getting back, that's the gamble. Flatley flips through technical drawings captured from a downed cruise navigation kit. His Japanese is limited, but the blueprints speak a universal language. He traces the fuel tank layout with his finger. The tanks run through the entire wing structure, unprotected, integrated directly into the airframe. It's an elegant solution to a brutal problem, range. The Betty was designed for one purpose, to strike deep. Farther than any other bomber in the Pacific, farther than the B-17, farther than anything the Allies could field in 1941. When the war began, the Betty could fly over 2,500 miles without refueling, carrying a ton of bombs or a torpedo. It could reach targets the Japanese Navy couldn't touch with carriers. It was supposed to be unstoppable. And for a while, it was. Flatley remembers the early days of the war. Betty formations hammering Allied positions across the Pacific with impunity. The Philippines, Wake Island, Darwin. They flew high, fast and far, appearing out of nowhere and vanishing before interceptors could scramble. The Allies had nothing that could match their reach. But the war has changed. American fighters are faster now, tactics are sharper, and the Betty's secret, the thing that made it so dangerous, has become its fatal flaw. Flatley stubs out his cigarette and pulls a fresh sheet of paper toward him. He begins to write, his handwriting tight and urgent. Subject: Mitsubishi G4M Structural Vulnerability Analysis. Findings: no fuel tank armor, no self-sealing systems, total reliance on range over survivability. Recommend immediate dissemination to all fighter squadrons. Exploit weakness, target wing routes and engine nacelles. Expected result: catastrophic fuel ignition. He pauses, pen hovering over the page. It feels almost unfair. Almost. Then he remembers the men who didn't come back from patrol last week. The burning wrecks floating in the Coral Sea. War doesn't care about fair. He signs the report and seals it in an envelope marked Urgent Tactical Intelligence. By morning it will reach every fighter squadron in the South Pacific. By the end of the month, the Betty will become the easiest kill in the sky. But tonight, Flatley sits alone in the tent, surrounded by wreckage, and wonders, how did they let this happen? How did one of the most advanced air forces in the world build a bomber with such an absurd, glaring, fatal flaw? The answer, he will learn, lies not in incompetence, but in desperation. Tokyo, 1937. 6 years before Flatley's discovery. 6 years before the flying lighter earns its name. The conference room at Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Engineers in crisp white shirts huddle around a drafting table, their faces illuminated by overhead lamps. Outside, the city hums with the energy of an empire on the rise. Japan is at war with China, and the Navy is demanding miracles. The specifications are impossible. Range, 2,300 miles minimum. Speed, 250 minutes. Payload, 1 ton of bombs or 1 Type 91 torpedo. Crew, 7, defensive armament, 4 machine guns, and it must be operational within 3 years. The lead engineer, Kiro Honjo, stares at the blueprints and does the math. Again and again. The numbers don't lie. To achieve that range, the aircraft will need to carry nearly 2,000 gallons of fuel. That much fuel means weight. Weight means drag. Drag means the engines will burn more fuel. It's a vicious cycle. There's only one solution. Strip everything that isn't essential. Remove every ounce of protection. Make the airframe as light as physically possible. Honjo underlines a note in red ink. Fuel tank armor eliminated. His assistant, a younger engineer named Tanaka, looks up sharply. Honjo-san, without armor, a single hit. I know. Honjo interrupts, his voice quiet but firm. I know. Silence fills the room. The men understand what this means. They're not just designing a bomber, they're designing a flying fuel tank, one that will carry brave men into the most dangerous skies on Earth, wrapped in nothing but aluminum skin and hope. But the Navy's orders are clear. Range above all else. Japan is an island nation. Its enemies are scattered across an ocean. If the bombers can't reach them, the war is lost before it begins. Honjo makes the decision. The armor comes off. The self-sealing fuel systems, rubberized linings that automatically close bullet holes, are deemed too heavy. Eliminated. Even the fire suppression systems are reduced to the bare minimum. The Betty will fly farther than any bomber in the world. And it will burn faster than any bomber in the world. By 1941, the G4M is in full production. Japanese naval pilots train on the aircraft with pride. It's fast. It's powerful. It's a symbol of Japanese ingenuity. And when the war begins in December, the Betty proves its worth immediately. On December 10th, 1941, 2 days after Pearl Harbor, a formation of Bettys takes off from airfields in southern Indochina. Their target, the British battleships HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, sailing off the coast of Malaya. The bombers fly hundreds of miles over open ocean. They find the ships, they attack. Torpedoes slice through the water. Bombs scream from the sky. Both battleships are sunk. It's the first time in history that capital ships underway are destroyed by air power alone. The world is stunned. The Betty has announced itself, but the cost is already visible. Several bombers don't return. Those that do are riddled with holes, trailing smoke, their crews lucky to be alive. The reports are filed away. The Navy celebrates the victory and orders more Bettys. By 1943, the war has shifted. American fighters are everywhere, and they've learned. Captain John Mitchell, leading a squadron of P-38 Lightnings over the Solomon Islands, sees a Betty formation approaching at 15,000 feet. He keys his radio, voice calm and cold. "Target the wings, short bursts, watch them light up." The Lightnings dive, guns roar, tracers streak across the sky like comets. The first, Betty shudders as rounds punch through its wing. A flash, then a fireball. The aircraft disintegrates in midair, pieces tumbling into the ocean below. The second, Betty tries to evade. It banks hard left, too slow. A P-38 closes in, firing a 2-second burst into the engine nacelle. The fuel tanks ignite instantly. The bomber becomes a meteor, trailing black smoke and flame as it spirals downward. Mitchell pulls up, watching the wreckage fall. His voice crackles over the radio. "That's two. Anyone else see how fast they went up?" "Like matches," another pilot replies, "like striking them." The name spreads. Flying Lighter, Flying Zippo, One-Shot Betty. Pilots joke about it in ready rooms, a dark humor born from the brutality of air combat. But the joke has teeth. The Betty is no longer feared, it's hunted. April 18, 1943. The Solomon Islands. Dawn breaks like a blade across the Pacific horizon, cutting the darkness with shades of crimson and gold. At Kahili Airfield on Bougainville, 18 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers sit in neat rows, their engines cold, their crews preparing for what should be a routine escort mission. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor and commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, is flying to the front lines today. A morale visit, a show of strength. 2 Bettys will carry him and his staff on a carefully planned route over Japanese-held territory. Fighter escorts will protect them. It should be safe. It won't be. 400 miles away, American codebreakers have already decrypted Yamamoto's flight plan, every detail. Departure time, route, arrival time. The information sits on the desk of Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet. The decision is his. "Get him," Nimitz says quietly. At Henderson Field, 16 P-38 Lightning fighters launch into the morning sky. Their pilots have been briefed on the mission's importance, but not its full scope. They know only this: intercept enemy bombers over Bougainville. Shoot them down. No survivors. Captain Thomas Lanphier climbs to altitude, his P-38 slicing through the humid tropical air. Below, the ocean glitters like hammered steel. Ahead, somewhere in the vast blue emptiness, 2 Bettys are flying to their fate. Lanphier's radio crackles. "Bogies, 11 o'clock low." He looks down. There, 2 bombers in tight formation, hugging the jungle canopy, trying to stay beneath radar coverage. 6 Zero fighters circle above them like protective hawks. The escort is good, but it won't be enough. "Attack!" Lanphier's voice is ice. The P-38s dive. The sky erupts. Zero fighters scatter, trying to intercept. Too late, too slow. The Lightnings punch through the screen like bullets through paper. Lanphier locks onto the lead Betty. His finger tightens on the trigger. The nose guns roar. 4. 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, all firing in unison. Tracers tear into the Betty's right wing. The effect is instantaneous. A flash of orange, a blooming rose of fire. The wing disintegrates, fuel igniting in a cascading explosion that consumes the entire aircraft in less than 2 seconds. The Betty doesn't fall. It simply ceases to exist, replaced by a tumbling cloud of burning debris and black smoke. Inside that fireball is Admiral Yamamoto. The second Betty tries to run. It dives toward the jungle, engines screaming, the pilot pushing the throttles to their limits. Another P-38 closes in. A short burst. The left engine explodes. The bomber shudders, trailing flame, and crashes into the dense green canopy below. The jungle swallows it whole. The entire engagement lasts 90 seconds. Lanfear pulls up, breathing hard, adrenaline surging through his veins. He doesn't know who was in that bomber, not yet. He knows only that the Betty did what it always does. It burned. 3 weeks later, Japanese radio announces Yamamoto's death in combat. The official story is vague. The truth is devastating. The architect of Japan's early victories, the man who dreamed of bringing America to its knees, died in a flying coffin of his own nation's design. The Betty's Flaw didn't just kill air crews, it killed admirals, it killed hope. Back at Rabaul, the mood among Japanese aviators is grim. They know, everyone knows, the Americans have figured it out. Every sortie is now a suicide mission dressed up as strategy. The bombers still fly because orders demand it, because the war demands it, because there is no alternative. Lieutenant Hajime Toyoshima, the veteran pilot with 12 missions, now has 27. He's defied the odds longer than most. His crew considers him lucky. He considers himself borrowed time. On a grey morning in June, Toyoshima's Betty takes off for a strike on Allied shipping near Guadalcanal. The mission profile is simple. Fly low, drop torpedoes, get out. Simple doesn't mean safe. They reach the target area without incident. Below, a convoy of cargo ships steams through calm waters, unaware. Toyoshima arms the torpedo, angles into his attack run, and wildcats. They come out of the sun like avenging angels, 6 of them, guns blazing. The first burst stitches across Toyoshima's cockpit canopy. Glass shatters. His co-pilot, Sato, the rookie who asked about the fuel tanks months ago, slumps forward, blood spreading across his flight suit. Toyoshima jerks the stick, trying to evade. Too slow. Another burst rips through the wing route. He hears it before he sees it, a dull whoomp, like a door slamming in a distant room. Then heat, then light. The fuel ignites. In the final seconds, Toyoshima doesn't think about the Emperor. He doesn't think about honor or duty or the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. He thinks about the engineers in Tokyo who removed the armor. He thinks about the decision made 6 years ago in a smoke-filled conference room. He thinks about how absurd it all is. The Betty explodes over the Pacific, a brief star in the midday sky, and then nothing. By the end of 1943, the Betty's reputation is cemented. American pilots don't fear it. They hunt it. Survival rates for Betty crews plummet below 30%. Entire squadrons are wiped out in single engagements. The aircraft that was supposed to dominate the Pacific has become a symbol of Imperial Japan's tragic miscalculation. But the war doesn't stop. The Bettys keep flying because there are targets to hit, because retreat is not an option, because the men who fly them are brave beyond reason and doomed beyond due. In late 1944, desperate to salvage the design, Mitsubishi introduces the G4M3, a revised model with some armor protection, self-sealing tanks, and improved fire suppression. But it's too late. The new version is too heavy, too slow, and too few in number. The damage is done. The original sin cannot be undone. On the ground, in workshops across Japan, engineers stare at the reports and wonder what might have been if they'd sacrificed 50 miles of range for proper protection, if they'd listened to the pilots who begged for armor, if they'd understood that reaching the target means nothing if you can't come home. But war is a river that only flows forward. Regret changes nothing. By 1945, the few remaining Bettys are repurposed for kamikaze missions, one final bitter irony. The bomber that was too easy to ignite becomes a deliberate instrument of suicide. Pilots load them with explosives and fly them into ships, embracing the fire that once was their greatest fear. The Americans, watching from their carriers, don't celebrate. There's no triumph in watching men burn, only the grim mathematics of war. Lieutenant Commander James Flatley, the intelligence officer who first discovered the Betty's Flaw, survives the war. He returns to the United States in 1946, carrying with him a folder of reports, photographs, and wreckage samples. He'll spend the rest of his career teaching at the Naval War College, using the Betty as a case study in engineering hubris. "They built a masterpiece," he tells his students, "and forgot to protect it." The lesson is simple. The cost was catastrophic. Okinawa, 1985. 40 years after the war's end, an American veteran named Jack Morrison stands on a cliff overlooking the East China Sea. He's 72 now, his hair white, his hands steady despite the decades. He flew P-38s in the Pacific. He shot down 3 Bettys. He remembers everyone. Beside him stands a Japanese man, roughly the same age. His name is Kenji Nakamura. He was a Betty tail gunner. He survived 4 missions before his aircraft was shot down over the water. An American destroyer picked him up. He spent the rest of the war in a POW camp in Australia. They've come here together, invited by a joint memorial service honoring airmen from both nations. It's awkward at first. They speak through a translator, their words halting, uncertain, but then Morrison asks the question that's haunted him for 40 years. "Did you know about the fuel tanks?" Nakamura nods slowly. "Yes, we all knew." "Then why did you fly?" Nakamura looks out at the ocean, where the afternoon sun turns the water into liquid gold. He's quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is soft, almost a whisper. "Because we believed it was necessary. Because we were told the range was worth the risk. Because we were young and thought we were immortal." He pauses. "And because saying no was not an option." Morrison nods. He understands. He's felt the same thing on the other side of the war. The same pressure. The same impossible choices. The same young men sent into the sky with machines that were brilliant and flawed in equal measure. "I'm sorry," Morrison says finally, "for what happened to your friends." Nakamura turns to him, surprised. Then he smiles, a sad, knowing smile. "And I am sorry for yours." They stand together in silence, 2 old warriors watching the sea, thinking about the ghosts in the wings. The Betty bomber is gone now. A few survive in museums, carefully restored, their fuel tanks empty and harmless. Visitors walk around them, read the placards, and marvel at their elegant lines. Few understand the terrible bargain embedded in their design. But the lesson remains. In engineering, as in war, every choice has a cost. Range for armor, speed for safety, victory for survival. The Betty's designers chose range. They believed it was the right decision. History proved them catastrophically wrong. And yet, on December 10, 1941, when those Bettys sank 2 battleships and announced a new era of warfare, the gamble almost seemed justified. For a brief, shining moment, the sacrifice looked like genius. War is full of such moments. Choices that seem brilliant until they don't. Innovations that change everything until they destroy the innovator. The Betty was one of those innovations. Elegant, deadly, absurd, a masterpiece built on a fatal flaw. Today, modern aircraft designers study the G4M as a cautionary tale. Every military aviation course includes a lecture on survivability versus performance. The phrase, "flying lighter," has entered the lexicon of aerospace engineering, a shorthand for what happens when you optimize for one variable and forget the human cost. But statistics and lectures can't capture what it felt like to sit in that cockpit, thousands of feet above a hostile ocean, wrapped in thin aluminum and hope, knowing that one bullet could turn your aircraft into an inferno. Only the men who flew them know that truth, and most of them never came home. The sun sets over Okinawa. Morrison and Nakamura shake hands, their grip firm despite the years. They'll exchange letters after this. They'll become friends. They'll meet again. But tonight, as Morrison flies back to California, he looks out the window of his commercial airliner, safe, protected, armored against the impossible, and thinks about the Betty. Somewhere below, the Pacific stretches endlessly, keeping its secrets. And in the depths, among the coral and the silence, lie the remains of 1,000 flying lighters, their final fires long extinguished, their story reduced to rust and memory. But the lesson burns on.